One, after terror attack in Boulder, Colorado. Many are focused on the threat to the homeland, the threat here at home in the United States. But are we vulnerable in a place we're not yet considering? Are we vulnerable when it comes to a drone attack? It's not just spitballing. We just saw it happen in Russia. What's the groundwork for it happening right here in the United States? 2, catch me up on Diddy and Karen Reed. 3, it's Pride Month, but nobody's changing their logos. Nobody except for one industry, sports. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. Make sure you set a reminder and hit subscribe at our Will Cain Show YouTube page. You can always find us as well at Will Cain on Facebook. If you're listening on terrestrial radio, but we'd love for you to listen to us at your schedule, then you simply subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. I have, excuse me, I'm not emotional. Something just caught me there. I have, I believe, one badass in my family. One. You know, I don't want to take anything away from my sons, and I would love to say that I'm, some tough guy. But for all the different people in my household, teenage sons, pretty good at soccer. I know soccer, fairly athletic, some with very competitive streaks and instincts. I really only have one member of my household who is a certified do not mess with this person. Okay. Better said, do not mess with this thing. Now, as many of you know, I got a new dog a few months ago. Saint. He's a big, scary-looking Doberman. And if you come to my front door, he is going to scare the bejesus out of you. First of all, he's got his ears cropped. He's black and tan. He looks like Batman when he's silhouetted. He's 75 pounds. He is going to threaten you with murder, okay? Whether or not you're the mailman or an air conditioner repairman, he's going to threaten you with murder. Now, I've only had him for whatever it is, 5 months. So I don't know how real or empty his threats are. But I know that he is not the alpha in this family. On Sunday night, I took my 2 dogs for a walk. I came home, and, they love to do this thing where they sprint into the backyard. They absolutely terrorize my backyard. And my female Doberman, Violet, just does the perimeter. At 100 miles an hour, she just does the perimeter, looking for squirrels or whatever it is she's going to be on the hunt for. And she is a huntress. I mean, this is how she spends her leisure time. Scanning, always on the look. When we go to the park, she never stops running. She's running everywhere she goes, smelling, looking for something to hunt. Saint is a goofball who's like thinking he's chasing her down or he's going to play ball. Well, on this day, they do have some good discipline, and they understand heel, and I don't use a leash when I walk, and they're good. They do have electric collars, so if, they're not good, then they get a reminder. Usually it's just a beep or a buzz. And they weren't quite listening in the way that I wanted to, and one of the things that they weren't listening about is they don't sit and stay consistently, but they are at about a 90% proposition when I open the gate to let them into the backyard. They're just so excited they want to sprint. But I make them sit, stay. They stare, eye contact until I say loose, and then they're off and running. But they've been a little iffy lately. So on this day, I made them sit and stay extra long, well beyond the patience and expectation. But I think what that did is it allowed things in the backyard to settle down, just settle down a little bit, calm in the backyard. Well, then I said loose, and they took off. And Violet did her thing. She sprints around the perimeter as fast as she can, and Saint's, bobbing along beside her. And then it stopped, and I'm like, but I heard this kind of banging and rustling, and I'm like, he's back there tearing up my bushes. because he has no spatial awareness and he jumps on top of my bushes and breaks all the branches. And it sounded like that, but then all the barking, whatever, excitement stopped. I'm like, what's going on? So I stomp back there, tearing up my bushes, and I get back there. He is about 10 yards away, staring in disbelief. And Violet is standing there with blood running all down her mouth and a 75% dead rat laying at her feet. The rat is, cartoonishly doing its last best, trying to, and she's gone in for the kill. And she has put Saint and me into absolute awe. She is a huntress, and she is an absolute badass. I think now on her record, she has one squirrel, one rat, and unfortunately, I believe a couple of bunnies, babies, I believe, because the grown ones are way too fast. And I don't even know. That's what I know she's gotten. And, I had to dispose of the rat and so forth. But then I'm sitting there and she's got these rat bites on both sides of her snout where she, clearly put up a fight before. And that's why she's bleeding. Now she's got rat puncture wounds. Not bad, but enough to be bleeding on both sides of her snout. And she does not care. I mean, she is not phased. She feels no pain. I mean, she is a certified killer. And she doesn't look it. He's 75 pounds. She's 58 pounds. He looks like a linebacker, maybe a linebacker. She looks like a cornerback, but she is all muscle and built like a Ferrari. I mean, just everything is in place. And she's putting that to use. By the way, I cleaned up the rat bites with like hydrogen peroxide or wound wash and a little bit of bacitracin or something like that. I did look up, like, should you worry about it? And the Dallas side of Will's like, should I take her to the vet? And then the Montana lived on a ranch side of Will's like, are you kidding me? This happens all the time. She's going to be fine. So I went with the Montana side of Will. She's going to be fine with a little bit of home remedy treatment. We'll find out. But the long and short of the lesson is, do what you will, raise them how you want. They come out this way, and I, in my house, have one certified badass, Violet. Let's get to it all now with story number one. After the terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, many are pointing to not what many of the mainstream media are dismissing it as a lone threat terror incident, lone wolf, but rather part of an increasing trend, a trend tied to illegal immigration, a trend tied to ideological extremism, and a trend that unfortunately suggests we could be vulnerable to much more. Here is Tom Homan on Fox News.
Do you not agree that if we don't find these people soon, that we are at risk of a 9/11 or worse?
It's coming. I mean, why did 2 million illegal aliens pay more to get away? They could have paid half of what they paid. This scares the hell out of me. I've been doing this for 40 years. It should have scared the hell out of every American what the Biden administration did. This 2 million known gotaways scares the hell out of me. So I'm convinced something's coming unless we can find them.
He's convinced something is coming. Now, this stat hit my radar today, and I was absolutely appalled. The man in Boulder, Colorado, who committed this act is an illegal immigrant who overstayed his visa. He was let into the Biden administration in 2022. He applied for asylum. He was given a 2-year extension and a work permit. It expired in March of 2025. So he has overstayed his visa. He is an illegal immigrant. Here are, according to CRS, the visa overstay illegal immigrants this is the fiscal year 2022. So who knows what it is today, but I found these stats fascinating. 176,000 visa overstays, illegal immigrants from Venezuela, making up 43% of the Venezuelan migrants. Mexico, 131,000, that's 3.6% of the total. But China, 31,819 visa overstays. 7.2% of the migration from China are visa overstays, illegal immigrants. That is a fascinating stat to consider. We often talk about the illegal immigration over the southern border. some of this does come over the southern border and they apply for asylum status or for visas. But we don't pay attention enough to whose visa has expired and whether or not they have been deported. And all of this is set against the backdrop of rising ideological extremism on the left in America, a tension that is boiling that you can feel and is now more than anecdotally supported that we're not just looking at lone wolf attacks. Fascinatingly, I heard Scott Jennings, who does bang-up work on CNN, and Tara Palmieri, formerly of Politico, having a debate about violence and extremism, wherein she tries to make the case, hey, it's both sides. Watch.
I don't think it is only the left. I mean, you have literally seen people on both sides committing violence. I think that the problem is not the left. I think it is the extremes on both sides of the party. And that is what's happening. Like they're the loudest voices, whether the leaders want them or not. And they're the ones who tend to be the most violent. I don't think that's fair to say it's only the left. I mean,
but why is it happening? Why do late night comedians go on TV and encourage or coddle or give lip service to this vandalism of what went on with Tesla dealerships and so on? Why are there so many prominent people who are
didn't get hurt?
I totally get why Luigi Mangione would murder a guy. Like, why? I don't understand.
Listen, I don't.
There you go. And that debate goes on for 4 minutes. Jennings smartly brings up what's happened around Tesla, the vandalism, which is on the edge of violence when it comes to firebombing these Teslas. What's happening on American college campuses? The rhetoric, quite honestly, at this point, coming from people like Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who's talking about bullying back Donald Trump. You know, and you say to me, Will, what does that have to do with what happened in Boulder, Colorado? Well, the Mideast Forum wrote a fascinating article about the increasing red-green alliance. The red-green alliance is an alliance, ideological, friend of my friend thing, or enemy of my enemy is my friend, between the far left and Islamists ideologically in the West. And it doesn't make any sense on its surface because many of the progressive values touted by the left are the type that are literally killed in Islamist countries. I mean, gays are thrown off the top of buildings in many of these Islamist countries. And yet here in America, the far left will scream, free Palestine. How does that make sense? Well, the Mideast Forum writes that the alliance is one not of commonality other than the enemy of my enemy. Both hate Western civilization. The left hates Western civilization because it's founded upon capitalism and constitutional democracies. They are much more wedded to the idea of socialism and globalism. Islamists hate the West because most of those nations in the West were founded on Christian foundations and represent the values which they literally outlaw. And that's how you see this ideological simpatico, hand-holding, and overlap, a red-green alliance. And it creates a very scary situation in the United States that feels at this moment like it has the potential to spiral out of control and maybe end up as something awful, as was suggested on Hannity by Tom Homan. But the part of our vulnerabilities when it comes to attacks on the domestic homeland that no one else is talking about right now is highlighted in what happened over the weekend in Russia. Ukraine launched what many are calling the Pearl Harbor of the Russia-Ukrainian war in attacking 5 different air bases across Russia. And these air bases geographically are scattered all across the country, far north in the St. Petersburg region, far to the east, thousands and thousands in 11 time zones away from Ukraine. How did they do this? They attacked nuclear-capable bombers at air bases sitting on tarmacs at 5 different locations across Russia. They did it via drone attack. They smuggled drones into Russia in shipping cargo containers that had false roofs that could be opened and then remotely operated, launching these drones, weaponized drones, that executed this surprise attack in Russia. Simultaneously sophisticated and simple. You think about what you would need to execute this type of sophisticated attack. You need access to land, the ability to ship, and in remote access to control. What is the vulnerability highlighted here for us home in America? Let's go back to that visa overstay issue. Just what first caught my attention on that is, for anyone that's grown up in a place like Texas or California or Arizona, you have had a front row seat to illegal immigration over the past 20 or 30 years. You've seen it. You've interacted with it. You've seen the changing nature of your state. What I mean by that is whether or not, it's someone who does manual labor in some way, or someone who is on your kid's sports team. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, largely Mexican nationals. Over time, you began to interact with and get to know, quite honestly, people from Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua. Anecdotally and increasingly, I can tell you, someone who lives in Texas and has for almost my entire life, you're starting to hear and see about Venezuelans more and more. And that brings me back to this stat, 176,000 visa overstays from Venezuela. So that's what first got my attention in looking at this. Then going down below Mexico and Colombia, but coming in fourth, visa overstays from China, almost 32,000 visa overstays. Well, that's concerning when you pair it with, for example, this chart, which I want to share with you, which shows Chinese farmland owned in the United States, U.S. farmland owned by the Chinese here in America, and its proximity to U.S. military bases. You can see, it's on your screen if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. What is that? 100? Dozens and dozens, over 50, approaching 100 different parcels of farmland scattered across America. California, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, across the Great Plains. Big pieces of farmland and located close to American military bases like Fort Cavazos, formerly Fort Hood in Texas, Camp Bullis, Camp Pendleton in California, Yuma Proving Grounds in Arizona, Whitman Air Force Base, Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota. All across America, huge swaths of farmland owned by the Chinese, situated, approximated, not far from U.S. military installations. What we just saw in Russia, the attack by Ukraine, combined with what's happening when it comes to illegal immigration here in America, visa overstays, and Chinese farmland owned here, it would take an ostrich with his head in the sand to not see the potential vulnerabilities that exist in a nation that is blessed with two gigantic oceans on either side of it, the Atlantic and the Pacific, great protective barriers that do not exist for most nations across this world. But what that attack in eastern Russia shows is, in modern warfare, how you can be vulnerable and where you need to be increasingly vigilant for vulnerabilities here at home in America. I have not kept up with Diddy. I have not kept up with Karen Reed. There's some of the things in the news cycle that just sort of get put on the back burner, but I want to get caught up. I want to get caught up on these two trials dominating the news. Attorney Lexie Rigden joins us next on The Will Cain Show.
I'm Dana Perino. This week on Perino on Politics, I'm joined by my friend, former Chief of Staff to House Speaker John Boehner and Senior Advisor to President George W. Bush. It is Barry Jackson. Available now on FoxNewsPodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
I'm Emily Campagno, host of the Fox True Crime Podcast. This week, author Mary Noe joins me to discuss the life and crimes of Eric Munter, as detailed in her book, The Man Who Shot J.P. Morgan.
Listen and follow now at foxtruecrime.com.
Two thoroughbreds have dominated the headlines, but only one will get the last word. Belmont Stakes. Coverage begins Saturday at 4 Eastern on Fox.
Saturday is Baseball Night in America on Fox. Devers leads the Red Sox against Judge and the rival Yankees. Or the Padres take on the Brewers. Saturday at 7:30 Eastern on Fox.
Kudlow on Fox Business is now on the go for podcast fans. Download the Kudlow Show podcast every weekday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com. Kudlow covers the latest headlines and business trends with an emphasis on the financial impact facing households and businesses across the country. Listen to interviews with key business newsmakers. The Kudlow podcast will be available on the go after the show every weekday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
Catch me up on Diddy. Catch me up on Karen Reed. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. I don't know if you're like me, but there are certain stories in the news cycle that I just can't keep up with. There are some, it's just too much. And whatever hits my radar and I invest in, I invest in some that I don't. But that doesn't mean I'm not interested and I don't want to know. So we've done this once before. We're interested in this recurring segment called Catch Me Up. Catch me up on some segments and some news stories that I am not familiar. We have attorney Lexie Rigden with us here today. She helped us out on Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively a few months back, and we wanted to bring her back to catch me up on these two big trials. How are you, Lexie?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I think I'd love to start, if you wouldn't mind, with Diddy.
Okay.
Diddy is a story where the details hit me like, I don't know, like I'm sitting at a restaurant and the chef just keeps bringing out sort of half of an part of the meal, not even the entree, at a time. Like I get half of the side, then I get half of another side, and I just kind of pick up bits and details here and there. So I'd love to start at the top, quite honestly. Very rudimentary. Can we start with, what are the charges against Diddy?
Well, Diddy is charged with RICO, Racketeering Influenced Organization Act. I think that's what it stands for. And that was created decades ago, essentially to ensnare mobsters who didn't get their hands dirty in things, but were kind of calling the shots. He's also charged with human trafficking and transporting prostitutes across state lines. So he's in a world of trouble. I mean, these charges carry, he could be in prison the rest of his life if he's convicted.
Okay, now let's go to some of the facts. What is he accused of doing that led to these charges?
Well, he's accused of human trafficking, and so we all heard about the freak-offs. We've heard about the lubes. It's very unseemly, the baby oil. But he's essentially accused of hiring prostitutes and having certain victims, including Cassie Ventura, who was his longtime ex-girlfriend, participate in these freak-offs by force. And then also transporting prostitutes over state lines, and that his bad boy entertainment group is essentially basically like a criminal enterprise. And there were crimes committed under the umbrella of that enterprise: arson, assault, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of charges. And I think that they're actually, when I was looking into this, the Karen Reed case is, I think, much more straightforward in terms of the legality. I think that the jury instructions are going to have to be very clear on this, because I don't think it's not as cut and dried as I'm making it. There are a lot of factual issues associated with these charges that the state's going to have to prove.
Okay, so here's what kind of washes over you if you're in the situation that I've been in when it comes to this. So Diddy has these freak out parties, right? They're kind of like orgies, right? Freak off. Okay. And they're kind of like orgies. Like he has everybody over, a lot of celebrities included, right? And it's sort of a free for all. Anybody can do anything. But tell me so and then within these parties, which by the way, that would not be illegal. It would be immoral, and we could all pass judgment on it, but it wouldn't be illegal. But the accusation is that he hired prostitutes, he transported them across state lines, and then he forced other people into prostitution, essentially. Is that right?
That is a very good summary. Yeah, that he hired prostitutes and took them across state lines, which I think has very clearly been established. What hasn't necessarily been established yet, and obviously I'm not a juror, I'm not in the courtroom, but the defense is going to argue that, for example, Cassie, who participated in these freak-offs, that she wasn't forced to be there. She did so of her own free will. She enjoyed them. She sometimes honchoed getting the people involved in them, and that at the heart of it, it was consensual. And what the prosecution is arguing is look no further than that video from the Intercontinental where he is beating her. He never denied that that was him. In fact, he posted an apology video when it came out saying, you know, I haven't been the best person. Yeah, no kidding. And they're using that as exhibit A as to this was her trying to escape a freak off. And he literally dragged her back into the hotel room. So that even if she had consented at some point, her consent ended at that point and it became, in effect, trafficking.
Okay, so I've seen that video, and I think a lot of people probably listening have that video of him beating her up in it's a hotel elevator bank area, right?
Yeah.
What I didn't know is what you see that when you see that is like domestic violence, right? What I didn't know is that's occurring as a freak off is happening somewhere in the hotel. So there had
That's the allegation,
and so
yes.
therefore, okay, and so therefore it's evidence of him compelling her, forcing her to stay and participate.
Yes, right. And then there were certain acts that were testified to. I mean, I won't get too graphic for your audience, but they're disgusting. And, you know, she testified that she didn't want to be involved in them, but essentially, you know, didn't feel like she had a choice. He had control over her life. He had videos of her in the freak offs, and she didn't want her career to be affected. She didn't want her personal life to be affected. So it's a very kind of like the allegations are very wide ranging, but it's kind of a situation where you don't know what the defense is going to do in terms of their case, but they're definitely going to hit hard on the fact that, especially in their closing, because they already cross-examined Cassie, that she was a willing participant in this and that she liked it. And that while you don't have to like Sean Combs, it doesn't mean that what he did was criminal.
Okay. What about the angle to this that there's all these celebrities that participated in it? I have at least, I don't know if I've read, but I've been led to believe that there was also sort of a extortion mechanism to this. Is that true? Like we've heard about other young celebrities or up and coming rappers that accusations of Diddy abusing them or putting them in situations that are compromising. Is that part of this as well?
That's not part of the trial. So that they have a few victims that are testifying, one of whom was Cassie, one of whom has actually absconded. But the victims that are testifying, other than Cassie, I don't think are actually famous people. Now, Kid Cudi, or Cudi, whatever, it shows my age. I don't really know who that is. I know he's a rapper.
Kid Cudi.
He testified that his car was firebombed by Diddy. So he was a celebrity. But in terms of celebrities who we think of their social circle, who they would hang out with, these A-listers, these megastars, they're not actually victims in the alleged human trafficking. I think that the parties were one thing, but the freak-offs, especially what's been testified to, were in a much smaller group of people.
It was. Okay, but aren't any of those other celebrities accused of participating in the freak-offs? And then therefore they would be potentially...
I mean, they're not charged in this. They're not co-defendants.
Okay, and then the Kid Cudi thing about who is a rapper, I'm familiar with him, and the accusation that Diddy firebombed his car and all that, is that part of the RICO charges that Bad Boy Entertainment and everybody around him was doing more than just human trafficking? They were also participating in all other types of criminal enterprises?
Exactly, yeah. So he's not charged with arson, for example, but that's part of one of the RICO predicates, that his businesses, that he was conspiring with people to commit certain crimes, including arson, because Kid Cudi was dating Cassie at the time, or they were having some type of a relationship. So it was motivated by jealousy.
Okay. I said this yesterday, and it seems like in learning more, this is not the evidence and the charges are much more substantiated here. I'm a little legally and media language wise skeptical at this point of the use of terms like human trafficking and all this. And it really goes back to when the government charged for a moment New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft with human trafficking because he went to a massage parlor in Florida, and it was a massage parlor that I guess they had been investigating and was, doing more than massages, maybe happy endings, maybe even more. I don't know. And Kraft was on the list of a bunch of people who had gone to this massage parlor, right? So it isn't an accusation that he ran the massage parlor or anything like that, but that he was a patron. And then they went after him for human trafficking. And that wasn't, in my estimation, anyone's either conversational, commonly held, or even legally definition of human trafficking. But when it comes to Diddy, he's not just a patron of these situations. He is coordinating it, is the accusation.
Yeah, he's coordinating it, and that people don't want to be participating in it because it's obviously not a crime to have kinky sexual proclivities. I mean, I think that there's nobody on the jury and no reasonable person learning about this who could say that Diddy is a good person. He's disgusting, and the people around him were frankly disgusting too. There were a lot of people who witnessed the abuse that he was meting out and said nothing. I mean, many, many people said nothing. But, you know, I too, as I know I'm a lawyer, but also as just a lay person, when you hear human trafficking, you think of somebody being kidnapped off of the street and forced to participate in these certain acts, which is why I think that the jury is going to have to be very well instructed on what the definition actually is, and that consent has an end point. And just because you consented at one point doesn't mean you still consent. And I agree with you that it's a little bit fuzzy. It's also a little bit fuzzy at this point how Bad Boy Entertainment or he was the head of any type of criminal enterprise as opposed to just an aggrieved boyfriend who was jealous. So there are weeks more to go for the state's case or the federal government's case. So that will probably come out. But right now it's hazy for me, other than the fact that I think Diddy is disgusting. And as a side note to that, it was unbelievable to me that his family, including his mother and his children, were in the courtroom when Cassie was testifying about the most dirty and depraved of their sexual acts. I mean, I can't even imagine. I don't. If I were Diddy, I'd say, you guys sit this one out for the day. You can show your support another way on a different day when the testimony isn't so disgusting.
But so you're honing in on the thing that and in part, I think it's part of why I don't like dive into these stories as much, is there's a hype around some of these stories in the media that runs either with the charges or even beyond the charges. And like what seems clear is what you're willing to say very clearly here today with us, Lexie, is like Diddy is gross and immoral and engaged in all this deviant behavior. On top of that, there seems to be strong evidence that he's also guilty of domestic violence, perhaps some acts of arson or vandalism, and this kind of thuggish behavior that in and of themselves are criminal, but at one level and one type of charge. The question is, when does it cross over into this much more heightened place that we have the conversation that involves human trafficking, that involves conspiracy in a way, you know, systematic, whatever it may be, abuse or prostitution. And you said like the blackmail and extortion is not part of this, but it has been part of the conversation around Diddy. Like, were these freak-offs designed to put people in compromising situations? Because there were stories about him having tons of videotape, right, as well.
Yeah.
So the question is, when you cross over from one level of immorality and criminality into this other place where we have a conversation about sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And RICO.
And it's just, you know, I think, like I said, I think the jury might have a hard time parsing this out. And I think this is an example. People always think that celebrities are treated extra specially, and in many ways they are. But this might be a situation where his celebrity actually hurt him, because I don't know if Joe Blow Public, who did these exact same things, would be facing these type of charges. Now, I say that, you know, I don't feel bad for Diddy. I mean, he's in this situation. He's clearly a bad person. He's a domestic abuser. He's a power hungry guy. You know, so I don't feel badly for him, but I do wonder if there's an element to overcharging in this. And everyone should also remember that arson, blackmail, assault aside, he's not charged with those things. Those are just predicate acts kind of underneath the umbrella of RICO, and also to show the jury that for example, the freak-offs weren't always consensual.
Okay. All right. Let's move to Karen Reed. What is Karen Reed? Which, again, this is something that's on foxnews.com and a lot of the... Well, first of all, why do you think there's a lot of criminal trials out there at any given time? And it's always a mystery to me why some become the thing that gets a ton of attention. And maybe that's another reason I'm reluctant. Like, what makes this case different? So let me ask you that. What makes this case different that's gotten everybody's attention?
Well, I will say, first of all, just to contrast it with Diddy, we kind of know what Diddy did, regardless of the things that he might weakly deny. the question in that case is whether it's illegal. The question in Karen Reed's case, I think, is much more sexy for people to tune into, which is, did she do it or not? And I think that in part is, as I sit here, I really don't know what happened in that case. And we'll get into obviously the nuts and bolts of it, but I think there's an element of a whodunit. She's an attractive woman. Even the police officers that were helping prosecute her had text messages read about she's a babe and everything like that. She has a high-powered legal team. One of her attorneys is relatively famous. He represented Kevin Spacey. So I think it's kind of, and the person that died was also a police officer. So I really think it's kind of like a cocktail of reasons that this case has really taken over the public. Also social media, because it was essentially like an influencer or podcaster that kind of brought it to light. But I think the most interesting aspect of it is, as I watch it unfold, I have no idea what happened. Sometimes when I sit there and I think Karen had to have done this, then I hear something else and I think maybe it was a conspiracy, maybe it was a cover-up.
I don't think we should underestimate the detail you gave. Like, she's an attractive woman, and it's a woman, and I think those things do get attention in a way, which is pretty interesting to know. I mean, I did a story on the Will Cain Show on the Fox News Channel a few weeks ago about a case out of South Carolina where, did the cop murder the guy he pulled over, or did the guy that pulled over start shooting first? And the family believes that, he was murdered. But it's got a lot of these details, but it doesn't have a female character. In quite honestly, these things become like stories, plays, like a female character, an attractive female character that gains attention. Okay, she is charged with what? First-degree murder?
She is charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident. And basically, the state is saying that she and her ex, or her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, who was a police officer, went to a house party. There was a lot of drinking going on, and they allege that she hit him with her car, and she has a cracked tail light and everything like that. So she hits him with the car. He's left in the snow. He eventually succumbs to hypothermia / his injuries. And then the defense's theory is basically the opposite. I mean, she said in an HBO documentary, which is interesting because her words are being played in the trial, although she's probably not going to testify. She said she dropped him off at the party. He went in, she left, and that was the end of it. And there's a lot of debate over whether he ever even went into the house, because she says he did. The people in the house say that he didn't. And there's an element to it of the conspiracy cover-up element is that where he went that night to the house party, it was a bunch of law enforcement people. And so what the defense is saying is that she didn't hit him with the car, and there was evidence planted of a tail light found in the snow. That evidence was planted and it was tampered with. And that it was actually the people in the house that he got in a fight with somebody, their dog attacked him, and then they dumped him out in the snow, which honestly sounds like an unbelievable and an unreal theory that you wouldn't necessarily propose. But when you start looking at like the evidence, there were things that you hear about, first of all, the lead investigator who's not testifying in this trial, because this is a retrial. The first one was a hung jury. His text messages were very bad about her. They painted him in a very bad light. He ultimately got in trouble for them. The second that this happened, he was texting essentially like, she's going down, she's a whack job, that kind of thing. So you have a law enforcement element, and then you have people in the house that have associations with law enforcement, and then you had a person in the house that she was having a flirtation with. A couple of people in the house have subsequently destroyed their phones so they couldn't extract them. The dog that allegedly bit him was sent to live at a farm. The people in the house were texting each other like, who's going to say what to the police. So while I'm not a conspiracy theorist and I generally don't believe in stuff like that, I will say that for a jury, if I were sitting on a jury, I don't know, especially considering his injuries are a little bit odd for someone who was allegedly hit by a car. They had a dog bite expert testify. His arm is covered in what looks like bites and scratches, which is just not consistent with what you would think would happen with a car accident. Of course, the state has experts saying, no, that is consistent. No two car accidents are the same, and he could have been hurt in this manner. But there's enough there that if I were on the jury, I would certainly not feel comfortable convicting her of murder. And I'm not sure I would feel comfortable convicting her of manslaughter either, which is kind of what happened in the first trial. There was a hung jury. They simply couldn't agree. So the case is really interesting, and it has a lot of layers.
So, okay, the prosecution's argument is that he never went to the party. She hit him out there. Where was he found? Was it close to the party or was it far away?
Yeah, it was right near the house. It was basically in the front yard, but there was so much snow that initially, allegedly, nobody saw him at first. But yes, that he was found in front of this house in the snow.
In front of the house. Wow. So the argument is that somewhere on the way from the prosecution to the party, for whatever reason, maybe they get in a fight, whatever it may be, he gets out and then she hits him with the car and leaves him there.
They had been fighting that day too. There are messages that they've been fighting, and they'd all been drinking. And that's I'm not a teetotaler, but I'm not a big drinker. And so many of these cases ends up where there's a problem because there's too much drinking going on. That is such a common thread,
right.
Not to sound like a preachy or, like some, self-righteous person, but a lot of these cases have that element.
Okay. And then the prosecution argues she goes home after this and her car is found in her driveway with a broken taillight and some, is that the extent of the evidence on the car, a broken taillight? I mean, I know that when you hit somebody, often in these cases, now it sounds like it was really cold, so maybe he was bundled up, but there's human tissue. There's a lot of things that would be left behind on the car.
And that's a good point. There was a hair in that area of the car. And while, every time there was a really great HBO documentary about this case. And every time I would hear a new fact, I'd go, boy, that's bad for Karen Reed. And then the defense would explain it away and it would make me go, it would give me the reasonable doubts. And their position is, number one, these two were a couple. So his DNA would have, been on the car potentially anyhow. But the other factor is they said, how would a hair on the car have survived a 60-mile-an-hour car ride to whatever Sallyport it got parked in for the police to search it? They're kind of going with a theory that the tail light, the hair, all of this was planted to shore up their case against Karen Reed so that their friends who were associated with law enforcement in the house wouldn't get in trouble.
Okay, and so the defense argues she dropped him off at the party. He went in. Okay, to that, the prosecution says nobody at the party says they saw him ever at the party. The defense argues, tell me if I'm getting this right. The defense argues, but they're all buddies. They're all in law enforcement together. Something happened at the party. She was flirting with one of the guys, so there's a potential for a conflict there. And that the cops or law enforcement friends murder him, I guess leave him out front, and then plant the evidence to make it look like she did it. Is that the defense's argument?
It sounds very unbelievable when you say it. Yeah, essentially that there was a fight. And I think that the defense attorney in the documentary even said, we don't think that they meant to murder him, but like there was some type of fight or altercation in there. The dog attacks him because he had, I think, puncture marks in his shirt also. The wounds, the injuries are very strange in light of being hit by a car.
I would think a dog bite would be easy to analyze, by the way. I would think that would be not consistent with getting hit by a car.
Well, and if you can easily Google them because they're public. The autopsy pictures of the arm, they do look like dog bites, and they had a dog bite expert. But then, of course, the counter to that is, no, it was glass. He was cut by the shark. I mean, you just don't really know, and that's the reasonable doubt that's creeping up, I think, in people's minds. But yeah, there was an altercation. The dog attacked him, and then they leave him out in the snow so that I guess it looks like maybe he died of hypothermia, maybe he hit his head, maybe he was drunk. That's what happens. And it's interesting to know that some of the people in the house, like I said, don't have their phones anymore. The dog was given away, so the dog can't be examined. They're not going to be able to do a forensic examination on the dog's mouth. So it's a real who done it. And I mean, we're never going to know the truth regardless of how the verdict comes out.
The point of the dog proves whether or not he was in the house, right? That's what the whole point of the dog is, to prove whether or not he actually went into the house at this party.
If he was hit by a car, why would he have these type of injuries? And really significantly, and I would be beating this to death in the closing argument, is that when the state's medical examiner testified as to the manner of death, which is basically, was it a homicide? Was it an accident? Was it undetermined? She said it was undetermined. I mean, she said that in the first trial. She said it in the second trial. And if your own state's expert is saying, I don't know if this was a homicide or not, to me, I mean, even if I don't necessarily believe Karen Reed, if you're being true to your oath as a juror and the standards that you have to abide by, I mean, you might have to acquit her. Even if you think she might have done
so
something.
is it a possibility? Is it a possibility that he simply wasn't murdered? Like, let's say he went into the party, he got in a fight, this dog thing happened, everybody's like, get out of here. His name's John, right? Get out of here.
Yeah.
And he's drunk. I don't know what his blood alcohol was, if they tested that. I'm sure they did. And like those guys in Kansas City who took drugs, the Kansas City Chiefs fans, and then couldn't get back in the house and froze to death outside. Like, is that not a potential cause of death or scenario?
It's a possibility, but he also has a lot of injuries. I think he had blunt force trauma to his head. So I don't think that they could go with a theory of he got bitten in the arm and then froze to death, because his injuries were bad enough that it had to have been something else.
Right. Okay. So the cause of death is he has blunt force trauma to the head and others, but she can't convince herself, the coroner, that it's definitely homicide based on that.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that is absolutely huge. I mean, in my heart of hearts, especially given what Karen said in the documentaries, which I don't know if her defense team is kicking themselves for letting her do it, or if they thought it humanized her. In some ways, I did kind of think it humanized her in a way. And then other things she said, I'm like, why would you say that? She's saying in the documentary, I did say to myself, could I have hit him? Could I have clipped him? Could I have hit him in the knee and not realized it? And then he fell. I mean, I don't think that I really don't believe that she got so angry at him she decided to murder him or back her car into him. But was she drunk enough? Because they were driving. I mean, I think she was driving drunk. She had a lot to drink. Could she have just hit him carelessly and didn't realize it? Absolutely. But I don't really
was it
think
the back of her car
in that scenario set out to murder him, regardless of the theory of who did.
Was it the back of her car instead of the front?
Yes, the back. But one of the bad pieces of evidence for her is that they, of course, with our cars nowadays, they're like moving computers. They can actually look and see whether someone accelerated, that kind of thing. And so one of the things the prosecution is showing is that at a certain time, around the time they would have been at that party, she accelerated at a certain speed and went backwards, which wouldn't, maybe not make sense in the context of where she was, but maybe she was just in a hurry to get out of there because she was pissed that he went into the house and never came out and she was in the car. So this evidence can really be spun either way, which is the difficulty, which is why I don't envy those people on the jury.
Well, and the other thing about any conspiracy, which the defense's counter story is a conspiracy, a cover-up, planted evidence, is can everybody involved stay quiet? So if something happened inside the house, how many people are we talking about who are with each other and staying on the same page and lockstep and staying quiet and maintaining the same story? How many people?
Yes. And that's a point that's been made, is that, what conspiracy is there that someone doesn't ultimately crack, especially with all of this media speculation and attention? Nobody has come forward and said, okay, uncle, we were part of it. It wasn't her. Give me the best deal you can and I'll rat on everybody else. That hasn't happened. But of course, again, because there's always a counter in this case, they're saying, what's the blue wall? It's the blue wall. This is what they do. They protect their own. So, gosh, it's one of those things that just kills me, because regardless of what the jury decides, we're never going to know the truth, because there's so many points and counterpoints to everything that's presented. And part of that is also good lawyering. She's got some really good lawyers.
Last thing, Lexie, I have a lot of friends who are attorneys and some that do criminal work. I went to law school, and I have a mind that, and I have an ideological predisposition to understanding the concept of reasonable doubt. Meaning I understand the power of the state, right? And the power of the state is overwhelming against an individual defendant who gets his own lawyer and so forth. But between the police department, sheriff's department, feds, whatever, the law enforcement mechanisms, and then the prosecutor, there's a ton of resources available to the prosecution. And if you can't make your case, you can't make your case. And you've got all that, and you still can't make your case to 12 jurors. I'm someone that believes in reasonable doubt and understands what that means abstractly. Like, you didn't prove your case. You didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, despite all the resources that you have. But what I've learned about human nature and psychology is most people do not, formalize that abstraction of reasonable doubt. They don't make decisions that way. That's not how we are as humans. And the power of an alternate story is actually really influential in the human brain. So, like, simply poking holes in the prosecution's case doesn't do it in the same way as here's another story for you to latch on to, for you to attach your brain to. And this story that Karen Reed's defense is putting together sounds to me, not legally, but just in the realm of psychology and human nature, powerful to a potential jury, that they have another story to go, well, I'm not sure that the story the prosecution has given us is the story.
I think that is 100% correct. It's way different to say, you guys didn't dot every I and cross every T, and you had a shoddy investigator. But to actually say, not only was this not handled well, but these are the people that were involved, and this is why they were involved. And there was a romantic element. There was a rivalry. There was a dog. I mean, they really told a compelling story that even as a reasonably intelligent person, which I think I am, I'm like, God, I don't really believe this story. It seems a little fanatical, or fanciful is the word. But I think if I were on that jury, it might be enough to say, you know what? I got to go to bed with my conscience clear. They told me beyond a reasonable doubt. I am not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. There's way too much else out here. There's way too much noise out here, noise masking the signal, really, for me to comfortably convict this person. And so my prediction would be another hung jury or an acquittal, or maybe something, not murder. I'm not sure that they could convict her of leaving the scene of an accident and not convict her of manslaughter. I don't know the rules in Massachusetts, but I don't think the prosecution's going to get the type of conviction they want here.
Well, I think I feel like I know something about Diddy and Karen Reed trial now. So
yes,
thank you, Lexie Rigden.
At first, I'm always saturated with true crime because I consume so much of it, and I'm like, I'm more interested in Coburg or whatever. But I started getting into this case, and I'm like, you know what? I get why people are hooked. It is very, very interesting. So I'd suggest you keep following it.
We got to do Coburger at some point in the future. That trial is this summer,
sure.
I believe,
Love
in August,
that
right?
Case. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great one. I mean, for true crime watchers,
I feel like
it's a great one, but it's good. It's very interesting.
I feel like I'm caught up on Diddy and Karen Reed. Lexie Rigden, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, check out Lexie, the lawyer. We always appreciate having her here on the show. Okay, it's Pride Month. And normally about this time, every company in the country, really across the world, is changing their logos to rainbows and trans flags. But weirdly, that doesn't seem to be happening this year, except for one industry, sports. When we come back on The Will Cain Show.
Stay on top of the latest forecast with America's Weather Team in the palm of your hands.
Here's the latest from America's Weather Center.
It's Fox weather updates throughout your busy day, every day.
That heat's going to be out there for one more day.
Temperatures being 30 degrees above average.
Put the power of over 100 meteorologists and the worldwide resources of Fox in your hands with the Fox Weather Podcast. Precise, personal, powerful. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com.
This is a new beginning.
Where common sense
is our common ground.
We're telling your story.
Is the most important story.
And we're not afraid to tell it.
Where American values unite us.
And don't divide us.
This is a time to come together.
For you.
For me.
For all.
For all.
For all.
For all.
For all. For all America.
For all America.
Fox News Channel. America is watching.
Hey, I'm Trey Gowdy, host of the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Join me every Tuesday as we cover the full range of topics that are on your mind and speak with some brilliant, talented, thoughtful women and men who have excelled in their respective fields and careers. Plus, every Thursday is your turn. You get to be the lawyer and you get to ask the questions about whatever is foremost on your mind.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Every industry but one celebrating Pride. Sports. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, on the Fox News Facebook page. Hey, hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. June is Pride Month. But take a look, if you will, at some of the logos on social media handles for the world's biggest companies. We have these for you over 3 separate screens, and we can take a look at the regular corporate logos right now. This includes EA Sports, BMW, Bethesda Game Studios, multiple accounts, multiple different wings, multiple different company versions of these corporate logos, none of them with the Pride logo attached to theirs now. None of them in rainbow. None of them showing what they have done over the past 5 to 10 years. Spotify, Lenovo, more and more esports, Overwatch esports, regular company logos, even though the calendar has turned to June. Well, Disney's, Ubisoft Mobile, Netflix, none of them. This is what they are this June. Now, if you looked at these same corporate logos over the past 5 to 6 more years, they would all be rainbow version, starting on June 1st. Today is what, June 3rd? No yet change in the corporate logos. Now, we need to point out, that doesn't mean these companies aren't celebrating Pride Month. Many of them, like Disney, still have scheduled events for Pride Month. But it's definitely a change from what we've seen in the past. Definitely a shift in the culture where they don't feel the need, the pressure, or they find it disadvantageous to now immediately and for 30 days change their logos into rainbows and trans flags and pride. Now, that is seemingly a vibe shift for almost every corporation in America. But there is one that's holding out. Not that they've changed their logo, but they put this ad out early this June. Here is the NFL. Watch this. Radio or Apple. It says football is gay. Football is queer. Football is trans. Football is freedom. Football is bisexual. And then it says support the Trevor Project, and it shows the NFL logo in its rainbow glory. Now, the first line, and it has, I don't know how many different adjectives, let's call it 25 different adjectives. Not all of them seemingly saying something about someone's sexuality, but maybe a good half of them doing so. The first one is football is gay. To that, Des Bryant, famed Dallas Cowboy wide receiver, went to X and he posted the following. He said, football is gay, football is queer, football is transgender. These are wild statements to make. Excuse my silliness. I'm going to proudly tell my boys football is none of these things. I have nothing against gays, but this is far from right. Des Bryant saying something that you can't imagine a football player saying, gosh, what do you think? 2-3 years ago? But he's saying something that is true. And it puts us in this position every June. He goes on to say, I have nothing against, gay people, bisexual, trans, whatever it may be. But why does everything else have to be what you are, what you proudly proclaim to be? There's no football is straight ads, right? So why does there need to be an ad to say football is gay? Which, that's worthy of a follow-up question, don't you think? Like, what do you mean? How is football gay? Des Bryant bravely, I think, asking questions, saying that's not what I would tell my sons about what it is. Football is a game. Football is competition. Football is life lessons. Football is teamwork. Football is resilience. Football is hard work. To my knowledge, I don't think football has a sexuality because I don't think football has sex. I don't think football is attracted. I didn't think it was to anyone. I thought football was a game. And I'm not sure why the NFL feels the need to say it's all these other things other than what I've known for quite some time. The major driving animus when it comes to sports is cowardice. It just is. For an industry that values bravery and competition and boldness in its effort, ultimately, publicly, the people that run sports leagues are driven by cowardice. And cowardice is always at the tail end. If there is a culture shift, if other corporations have already noticed it and you don't have to, or see no upside, or don't see what it has to do with your company mission, to celebrate Pride Month in the way that has been demanded over the past 6 to 7 years, then why still do we see it in sports? It also reveals what other companies were doing for the past 5 to 10 years. They were just exhibiting cowardice. They were following whatever the culture demanded when the culture demands it. And now the culture has moved on. They no longer do it. Maybe you could say that sports is brave because they're going to keep doing whatever it is they believe in despite the vibe shift, despite the fact the rest of corporate America has moved on. However, the real test of that will be, do you think the NFL will be doing this? If no other corporations go back to doing this, will the NFL be doing this in 2 to 3 years? I think you and I both know the answer to that. They'll just be late revealing, like every other corporation, they're driven by cowardice, but an enhanced tail end of cowardice when it comes to sports. So that's what's happening this Pride Month. All right, let's leave it there today. Our boy Two-A-Days Dan is out sick. We wish him the best of luck in getting better. We heard it in his voice yesterday. Maybe. We'll see. He'll be back tomorrow. But for now, that's going to do it for us today here on The Will Cain Show. We will see you again. Same place, same time next time.